We've been following data visualization as a general topic for a number of years. There's incredible work going on, of course, at Purdue, as we've just learned. But I'm also a proud graduate of this institution, and there's some pretty darn good work going on here as well. And the things that are possible with data visualization and being applied in other fields, as we've just seen, are really just incredible. I want to start off with yet another hashtag. Anything Paul does, I try and do as well. And this is the official hashtag of the Horizon Project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. If you haven't seen it, you can download it at the most recent higher ed report at this URL. Go.nmc.org is our kind of easy to remember URL. And if I were to summarize the project in a very simple way, it's kind of based on the insight of this man, who is William Gibson, who you may know as the author of Neuromancer and was the person that came up with the term cyberspace and a couple of other things. And a number of years ago, he was being interviewed by Atlantic magazine, and he made a comment that has stuck with me ever since, and that was this, that the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And that's really the secret behind the Horizon Report, is that we go out and we look to see what other people are doing in other sectors outside of education, in other countries, in other parts of the world, to see where the innovation has been happening. We've done that now for a dozen years, produced 42 editions over that time. It's been translated more than 60 times into about 15 languages, and we're really amazed with where the project has gone. And just to give you a sense of the reach, Paul gave you a little bit about that. These are the first 1,000 downloads after we released the higher ed report on February 4th. So this is 1,000 downloads, about less than an hour of time, and it gives you a good sense of the coverage. That report's been downloaded well over 150,000 times now. And the report itself is not really the topic of my talk today, but it is background for what I'm going to share with you. I've got some ideas about what we need to be thinking about when it comes to learning analytics and data analysis and those sorts of things. And so we'll just kind of jump into that. And the first thing is that we've done a lot of thinking about trends, and we've begun to categorize the trends that we see into different groups depending on how fast they're moving, because we've noticed that there's different characteristics in each of those categories. And so I could give you an example of two that were in the very first category, fast category. These come along really, really fast. They're generally characterized by tremendous excitement and a rush of people to gather around them. And then the pendulum swings and there's an almost equal and opposite reaction, which we call pushback. But you could put virtual worlds came in that category a few years ago. You could argue a pretty good case that MOOCs were in this category 2 years ago. And it's important for us to kind of recognize which trends, it's not just is a trend important, but is it going to have lasting impact? Is it going to be around for a long time? That's one of the things we look at. And in the case of the topic of this conference, the trends that impact data visualization, learning analytics, are in the last category. They've been in place for more than 5 years. They're going to be in place for the next 5 years easily. They're inexorable. And we're seeing a continuous stream of development and iteration and growth in that. And those are the kinds of trends that for us can have really significant and lasting impact. So that's kind of where we're at. We're really interested in, when we look at trends as well, as their implications on these three areas: policy, leadership, and practice. Policy is required sometimes to make things happen. It just has to be okay. It has to be not against the rules, for example, to have a handheld device at your organization. In some schools, it's still not able to be used, and those sorts of things are really at the policy level. Leadership, of course, is to implement that policy in ways that can help people understand and make it effective, and ultimately the goal is into practice. We don't just look at trends, though. We're also very interested in the other side of the question. Trends tend to drive decision-making and encourage you to do things. We also look at challenges, the obstacles to these sorts of things, and we think about challenges in three ways as well. The first category we call solvable challenges, and the notion is that we think of challenges having two dimensions. The degree to which they're understandable. Do we see the dimensions of the challenge? And do we know solutions? Are there solutions that could be applied if we wanted to apply them? And so a solvable challenge, the squares filled in on both dimensions, that we know the problem and we know how to solve it. The second category are difficult challenges. We understand the problem, but we don't really have good solutions yet. And those are a different category. The third category, the most challenging, is we don't have anything to work with. Wicked challenges, these are talked about in design thinking a lot, but we don't understand it. The more we look at it, it morphs, it changes, it seems to be something else. Exactly the kind of thing that David is looking at, and one of the reasons why you need to know what questions are important going in. And because we can't understand it, we don't even know where to start. Of course, there's no solution. So that's kind of how we frame the work that we do in the Horizon Project. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about learning analytics because we just wrote a paper for you, and you could download this, which is an NMC strategic brief. These are not usually public documents. We produce these for our partners, but this one is hot off the press. It literally was finished yesterday, and I thought, well, why not share it with this group as well? And so you can download this one at nmc.org/dataviz, and I think that you'll find it interesting. It talks about the implications for higher ed and K-12. There's a lot of tools and examples. We talk about the companies in the space, the implications for students, teachers, families, administrators. And then in the report, we also focus on what's going on in 4 countries, the US, South Africa, India, and Finland. And you may wonder, well, why those 4? Well, because that's what they asked for, the partners, so that's why we did it. This space is a lot going on, and so we've also included in appendices a bunch of benchmark projects that you could look at and relevant readings. And so I encourage you to download this. It's, as I say, not a kind of report that's usually available, but it's very germane to this topic, so I wanted to share that with you. Now, when I look at the kinds of amazing things that we've just seen, and try to imagine how we could apply them to education, I run into consistently the roadblock that we don't really have a whole lot of data. We have also some significant challenges in creating systems that will generate data for us. And so let me just take a couple of minutes and give us some context here. When I came to UT to get my doctorate, I wrote a paper about the evolution of the modern university, and I got to read this book, which formed much of my perspective for my career about what universities are all about and what they're for, and it boils down to very simply 3 things. Universities are about knowledge. We want to conserve knowledge, we want to create new knowledge, and then probably the most important role of the university is to pass knowledge on to the next generation so that humanity can continue to grow and prosper. Now, the university as we know it has been around a long time. This is the very first university that historians identify as in the modern mold. Nalanda University, it was founded in the 5th century. It was destroyed in 1193 in northern India, and all that remains of it now are these ruins. The first university and the oldest university in the world is the University of Al-Qarawiyyin, which was founded by a woman, by the way, in 859. It's the oldest continuously operating degree-granting university in the world. Been there since 859. A lot of the universities that have persisted come from the Middle East. This one located in Egypt, Al-Azhar, is the second oldest surviving degree-granting institute, founded in 970. And you could go on and on. This is a series of universities that connected all of present-day Iran and were the first madrasas. And they were amazing places. They're in ruins now, but what's left even shows you, the degree to what they had. Most of you have probably seen this photograph. This is the first Western higher education institution, founded in 1088. And this is where the term university was first applied. It was coined at the creation of this institution, the University of Bologna. Still around, and they established the model again in 1088 that we still use today. In fact, we're doing it right now. That's me in the podium, and that's you in the pews. It's a little more modern setting, but functionally it's exactly the same as it is. And the universities that we have the most respect for are also grounded in 1,000 years of history. The University of Oxford was founded in 1096, also the Sorbonne the same year. The English can't do anything that the French don't do. And interestingly enough, the University of Oxford developed rapidly until Henry II banned English students from going to France to study at the Sorbonne. And then it really exploded after that because they wouldn't let the kids leave. And even really more modern universities, the University of Sydney, are modeled on this approach. And so, as I think about that context and how similar this setting looks to the University of Bologna, it makes me want to establish, kind of the context for this discussion when you think about leadership on campuses. And when I talk to university presidents and school superintendents, these are the things that they're thinking about in most cases, particularly internationally. Political and other realities in other countries are enormously important. In Cairo, the universities are closed right now. They've been closed for 2 months. A colleague of mine that's a professor in the medical school there is teaching, thank God, online to keep her students going. But these are the kinds of challenges that in other parts of the world are ever present every day. Now, you look at the other end of the scale, the top universities are always wanting to attract and retain the top students, the top faculty. At the same time, though, our mission is shifting and our focus is shifting. What is the purpose of higher ed? Is it to prepare people for the workforce? Are we moving away from the notion of liberal arts education in that? Some institutions are, and in fact, pretty much every major university has a number of professional schools that are explicitly and proudly aimed directly at producing top people for the job market, and they differentiate themselves based on that. We've got private sector competition, and particularly smaller regional universities, they deal with this all the time. It's probably one of their biggest challenges. And then even where things are going well, you can't ignore governance and transparency within your institution. And of course, the demographics and the needs of students have been changing now for many years, and will soon be a minority-majority nation, and the impact of that. And so these are the things that I'm hearing all the time. What I'm not hearing in these conversations is concern about learning, or concern about the reason why we're here. And so I guess I'm taking that voice to remind us that not only do we need to create great science, But we also need to create an awareness of why that's important, and that speaks to one of David's points as well. And so, looking at the topics that we study that have been part of that, we can place them on our trends chart fairly easily. Learning analytics, which is, in our view, more similar to web analytics than other forms of analyzing learning, has been stuck in the midterm for about 4 years. It's about 4 years away all the time, 3 to 4 years away. That doesn't mean there's not been a lot of development and a lot of movement during that time, but it hasn't moved closer to becoming a mainstream practice yet. It still needs some work to do to be out there. Personalized learning, which we think is the end goal of all of these sorts of things, is 5 or more years away from being mainstream uses, and it's been 5 or more years away for a number of years, because we have to really, it's back to this data idea that we need to be able to do that. And adaptive learning is also in the same spot, 5 years away. Data visualization has moved recently from the further category to the near term, but still a number of years away. So that's kind of the context of these trends. They're moving continuously and constantly, but I think that it's important for us to understand that we've got not a lot, but a number of years of work yet to do. And the challenges are different in higher ed than they are in schools. When you look at the challenges in higher ed that institutions are worried about, they're very different than the ones that schools are worried about. Higher ed is a very different operating environment, and when it comes to learning analytics and data visualization, these are big, important, flashy, well-funded often. I hope it's well-funded with the folks in this room. But important research projects. It's in the research arena more than it is on the learning side of the house. And there's a lot of good work going on. In schools, they don't really know where to start with this. They're looking to commercial vendors to help them with it. They don't have the skills to really invent this stuff. They don't have the time to invent this stuff. And they're looking for companies to come in and help them. They recognize, pretty much everyone recognizes, wow, if we really had good data on learning, wouldn't the world be an awesome place? We could do so many amazing things. And the danger for schools is that they may buy too soon. They may buy a good sales pitch rather than a good solution. And I think what we need to do, the people in this room, is work very, very hard to help the companies in this space to really take the long view on this and be part of the solution, because ultimately for schools, they are the solution, and we need to be aware of that as we're doing this work. So let me just kind of point out just quickly the difference in the challenges that people are looking at in higher ed and K-12. So in higher ed, in the solvable category, the low digital fluency of faculty. Faculty really don't get any training in digital tools in most programs. It's not part of their studies, not part of their path to success. And once they enter the field, there's really not many rewards for teaching. The rewards lie elsewhere. You're a good fundraiser, you're a good researcher, you're on the admin track or something like that. We mentioned competition from new models of education, but even where there are great models within higher ed, the challenge is to scale those. Because in higher ed, really a lot of the faculty see themselves as kind of their own shop, and they don't really collaborate a whole lot, which is why this is a difficult challenge. We know a lot about how to scale innovation, but we don't know how to do it in a university context inside the university. We know how to take it from the university to the world, but not the other, not within. And then even further out, just how to keep what we do relevant in the context of conversations about how much it costs to go to the university, how much time it takes, how many people don't make it, staying relevant in the middle of all of those sorts of droning concerns that are out there, and expanding access at the same time. So those are the higher ed challenges. The K-12 ones are really more around learning. They are also concerned about digital fluency of teachers, but what they see as challenges that they could solve is making learning more authentic, blending formal and informal, and personalizing learning. None of those appeared anywhere in the higher ed ones, I think, and these are ones that K-12 feel like they even know how to solve. A little further out, we also see scaling innovation as a thing, but the big one that we hear over and over and over again is a concern about privacy. And whenever I go into K-12 to talk about any of these topics, the first thing that comes up is privacy. And in other countries, it comes up, and the second thing that comes up with is the privacy, or the Patriot Act and the NSA, and then the conversation starts to go downhill, at least for someone from the U.S. They're also concerned about keeping education relevant, but interestingly, they're also very interested in balancing their lives in a way that we just don't hear talk about in higher ed. So there's some real distinctions there. That's just kind of the world that we operate in. And I have just a few more minutes, and I'm going to spend them sort of looking at the world as it is through the eyes of a number of generations. So one of the things that strikes me, and many of you have probably thought about this before, is that in every generation there's a moment that defines that generation. And so for my dad, who's in his late 80s, it was this moment when Pearl Harbor was attacked. That was the defining moment of his life, and he sorts of measures things from that. In my own life, it was this moment when John F. Kennedy was shot, and then Martin Luther King, and then Robert Kennedy, and that was my coming of age time. And I wonder a lot, what's the coming of age time for the kids today? Well, clearly, it's 9/11. For the kids that are in school today, they were in, the 5th grade like I was when John F. Kennedy was shot. That was them. And so I wanted to take one young person that I know very well. This is my son. He's now a high school teacher, just recently graduated. And when he thinks about the world and the network, he really views it as something that connects us all. And in this context of major sorts of things, he's seeing not just the towers coming down, but also things like this, responses to the world as it is. So the anonymous group and this guy, and the openness and release of documents, however you feel about it, and where all that's gone, and feeling a great connection to what happened on this day when somehow, unimaginably, the internet went dark for a day, and we stopped SOPA and PIPA in its tracks. You never heard of them again. The Congress just dropped the whole thing. They went, oh my God, I've never seen anything like that before at all. When he thinks of the networks, he thinks of it as an agent for social change. And the one that comes up a lot is this one. And it started with a young man in Tunisia who immolated himself in protest to what he felt was an oppressive government. And a Facebook page was put up called We Are All Khalid Saeed in his memory, that in the space of 2 weeks gathered 450,000 followers. And within 2 weeks after that was the organizing point behind this gathering of hundreds of thousands of people in Cairo that brought down an entire government from Facebook. Edward Snowden, who just was named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world, whatever you think about him. The impact of him on the world has resonated with young people in a way that is deeply profound. And when I think about what to make of it, it's this, that the internet and the connections to it have become synonymous with this word, freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of assembly and expression. That's the world that these young people that we're talking about live in. They live in a world where they feel like that one person can make that kind of change happen. One person can step up and do that. It's amazing. And we think about where the world's going to go in the time periods that we're talking about while we're here, you know, and these kinds of kids, and in 5 years she'll be in the 5th grade. And let's hope that that classroom doesn't look like this. Thank God most 5th grade classrooms don't. I'm really pleased about that. But you know, we have some work to do to make sure that we stay relevant in here. And so as I get ready to close, you know, I've got these suggestions that as we tackle these problems, we need to be open to solutions that may be very novel and new to us. We need to try new things as a core way of doing things. So we need to take risks and be curious. And when we fall, we need to celebrate that. Failure needs to be part of the journey. We need to seek uncommon wisdom wherever we can find it and be creative. And that's going to give us the vision that we need to do this. So one more slug for the paper, okay, in case you didn't get it before. go.nmc.org/dataviz. And back to Bill Gibson. The future really is already here. There is so much good work going on that I think the first step for any of us as we journey into this space is to make sure we understand what the state of the art is and build from there, because it really is just unevenly distributed. So that's it. This is the group that's going to make this happen, I think. I agree with Paul that this is a remarkable gathering. It's a small, intimate group. I hope we all have a chance to interact and talk and to generate great ideas. Thank you very, very much.